This is Think Energy, the podcast that helps you better understand the fast-changing world of energy through conversations with game changers, industry leaders, and influencers. So join me, Dan Sege, as I explore both traditional and unconventional facets of the energy industry. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's show marks the 100th podcast episode. Woohoo! It's hard to believe that we've already reached this milestone. I want to thank everyone that has worked behind the scenes on the show, our incredible guests who graciously shared their time and expertise, and of course, dear listener, thank you for tuning into our program. It's truly been an honor for me to share information about the energy sector and all of the amazing people that work in this industry. So with that, let's get on with today's 100th podcast episode. As we discussed over many interviews, the energy landscape is evolving at lightning speed. Those innovations and change are coming fast and furious, and there's a lot for customers to absorb. It's clear that, perhaps more than at any other time in history, customers are thinking about their electricity, how it's made, how reliable it is, how much it costs, and how they can be more in control of it to power their lives. What customers want and expect is changing the electricity sector. It's changing how utilities do business, how they communicate, and what service offerings they provide. Customer expectations have never been higher, and utilities must evolve, innovate, and provide exceptional expertise, programs, and technology to give customers what they want and expect from a modern utility. From smart home tech that can help customers manage their device and overall consumption to home generation technology like solar panels, batteries for energy storage, and incentives for installing those renewables, and even how to better prepare for a changing climate, more storms, and an increase in frequent and prolonged power outages. So here's today's big question. How are utilities planning to meet the expectations of today's customer and their needs? Today's guest is my boss, Julie Lupinacci. As the Chief Customer Officer at Hydro Ottawa, Julie is responsible for developing and implementing the customer strategy, transforming the total customer experience and guiding the direction of the business in terms of customer needs. She provides oversight for customer service, marketing, product development, external communications, public affairs, corporate reputation, and the overall branding strategies. With more than 15 years in customer care, sales, and marketing, Julie has a wide background in business, including project management, customer and vendor relations, international partner program management, procurement, sales, marketing, and program development. Wow. Julie, thanks for joining us today. Now, you've been in the electricity industry approximately 5 years now, maybe a little more. In comparison to your experience with customers in other industries, how are electricity customers different? How are their needs unique?
Yeah, so it's been interesting, and when I got this question, I was thinking back on the last 5 years and how much I've learned about the industry and learned about our customers in particular. And I would say the basis of what's different is the industry we're in, right? Like Hydro Ottawa is essentially provides an essential service to our customers, which didn't happen in my previous world. So the fact that the customers rely on us for a product that is so essential in so many aspects of their lives. For some customers, it's a matter of life and death, right? That in itself changes how we work with our customers and what their needs are, and what we need to support. So that reality is something that we have to hold in the forefront of everything that we do. The very nature of what customers needs from us makes that different, right? The timelines of what they need are tighter, and the criticality of our communications to customers becomes even more heightened. Whether it be a storm or an outage at one person's house, like that doesn't matter. The customer is out of what we need to provide, and the criticality of getting that back in a very condensed time frame in order for that customer to continue moving forward is becomes essential. So everything becomes a lot tighter and more critical. And I would say the other component of what we provide, it's not in some cases, customers don't have a choice, right, on whether they need electricity or not. Like, I guess, and fundamentally they could figure that out. But if you've come to rely on electricity for your daily needs and to run your household, the fact that electricity is now part of your requirement, you don't get to have a choice necessarily. Do I want electricity today or tomorrow to put my lights on? Affordability becomes a big component, and it's one that we need to think about for our customers. The choices on how we develop the grid, how we evolve as an organization. We need to keep affordability, sustainability, and the fact that energy needs to be attainable for our customers. That has to guide what we do. And that's not true for every industry, and definitely not true for the previous ones I've worked for.
Julie, what are the three biggest issues for electricity customers right now?
Yeah, I think right now, in November 2022 or December 2022, as this airs, affordability is probably front of mind for most customers. The share of wallet is just not going as far with the cost of inflation. I think that's probably the primary issue for electricity customers right now. But I would say that a close second is what the reliability of electricity is. So as there's the climate adaptation that we are doing as an entire city, as we're looking at what, more extreme weather events that are coming, the reliability of what we provide is probably a close second, right? So they want to be able to afford the commodity that is coming into their house, but they also want to be able to rely on it. And as they're making choices for what their energy future is going to be, as they're making choices about what car they're going to be purchasing next, as they're going to make choices for how they're going to heat and cool their home, and making choices about fuel sources, you want to make sure that you're choosing what's reliable and that reliability is there. So I think affordability and reliability are close 1 and 2, and that it's sustainable, right? We've got a lot of people that are thinking about their future, their carbon footprint, their net zero. So I think people are looking at how do I conserve my energy usage? How am I smart about what I'm doing? And how am I making sure that I'm choosing things that are going to be there for the long haul, right? And looking for something that's sustainable, that's good for our planet, but is going to be around, and something that they can count on.
Okay, now I have a follow-up question. What are some of the ways that Hydro Ottawa is addressing those customer issues?
Yeah, so we're doing a number of different things. So one, I think how we put together plans for the growth of the grid, how we put plans to maintain the grid and evolve the grid, is definitely something that we look at with those three things in mind. But also from a customer perspective, we are looking at bringing programs to them to help them have more access and more readily access to that information. So get a hold of their data so they can start making decisions. We're working with the Ministry of Energy on different pricing programs that might make sense according to the different behaviors. Not everybody has the same lifestyle. Not everybody operates only, in the evenings in their house. Some people are, especially during the pandemic, like we've seen very different lifestyle and work days come to be. So we're really looking at all of those things that are happening here in Ottawa and marrying programs that make sense, both from a pricing perspective as well as energy choice. So looking at different EV programs that we are bringing forward, looking at different energy efficiency programs that might be there, and getting information into the hands of customers. In particular, there's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of years, I'd say, maybe a little bit more, about net zero. And with the announcements the federal government, provincial government, and even municipal government have made, customers are thinking about how they play in that. And there's a lot of questions. And Hydro Ottawa is providing information to those customers to be able to help them be informed of what's possible, and then help give programs to get them on pathways to get there for themselves.
We are all aware that Ottawa has had some major weather events these past 5 to 6 years. What would you say to customers that are worried about reliability, power outages, and restoration?
Yeah, weather events have been tough. They're tough and I don't think Ottawa has seen something like this in a very long time, like probably since the 98 ice storm. And I'm not even sure that really measured up to the same impact, right, of what we saw and what customers dealt with. But what I would say is Hydro Ottawa's put a lot of focus on what we need to do from a grid perspective to adapt to the changing climate that we're seeing here in Ottawa, and that includes those weather events. And I don't want to pretend that I know more than our chief electricity distribution officer. I think you interviewed him maybe a couple of weeks ago, and that podcast he talks about what we're doing to future-proof the grid against those extreme weather events. So I'm not gonna try to think that I have anything more impactful that he will say on that front, but I will say that from a front office perspective, from a customer service, from a communications perspective, we are really looking at a lot of those tools and further modernizing them. And what I mean by that is taking a look at some different technology that allows us to receive more phone calls into our system, triage those phone calls using some cloud-based technology, so that not everybody is forced to talk to an individual. Because even at the height of a storm, you're not going to have 10,000 people answering phone calls within a couple minutes of a storm hitting. But we can use technology to triage, to allow our customers to know that we know if they are out of power, and provide them with the information that we have at that time. So looking at updating some of the telephony software that we have and utilize some of the new technology there. So we are actively working on that. The other component to communications, because I think communications really is that biggest avenue for our customers, especially during these weather events, is pushing information out. And we are looking and working on an SMS text-based technology system that allows us to push information out. So similar to what we are pushing out through our social media channels today, now sending that information directly to customers, either on their iPhone or potentially in their email box, however they want to receive those inputs and alerts from Hydro Ottawa. We also took some steps to help people become aware, like the weather alert, the weather system and the weather alerts that are out there, giving people heads up on systems that are coming through. That's one thing. But I think customers want to know when we're looking at a weather event that's different, right? You'll know when rain's coming into Ottawa, and you'll get those alerts about snow and all of those things, but not all weather impacts our grid. And what we're looking at is to be able to provide an alert system, again, through whether it's SMS or an email out directly into customers' inboxes, so to speak, giving them a heads up when we're watching it differently, right? And if we're watching it differently, messages are going out, make sure phones are charged, make sure that you've got blankets, make sure you know where your flashlights and your candles are. So really concentrate on getting people ready for what they need to do. So there's a few steps, and you can follow us on hydroottawa.com to get better details on that. But that's what we're doing, and making sure that we're putting that out there. Additionally, we've piloted, sorry, Dan, I got one more. Additionally, we've piloted a battery program. This was used to be able to support some of our capital work. But in the recent storm this year, we used that battery pilot to be able to help some of the most vulnerable customers in Ottawa that are really relying on electricity to be able to breathe, right? And working with the paramedics hand in hand to make sure that these batteries got to those households so that they, had some additional time for us to get the power back on, either to their house or to the community.
Now tell me, Julie, what are some of the things customers can do to be better prepared for emergencies and outages?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things that we need to do. One, I think we need some major awareness about what that is. Like, go back to our elementary school days when we had to plot out the fire escape plan for our house, right? And go back to thinking about, if there's an emergency, do we have an emergency kit together, right? Do we have bottled water in our systems, in our house? Do we have working flashlights, right? Not just flashlights that don't have batteries, but what are those batteries, and are they up to date, right? Making sure that you have them not in all over the place, but where these flashlights are, right? And I know if anybody's like my kids, they come and they grab the flashlights and all of a sudden they're in different locations around the house. Like, your emergency kit needs to be in one central place so that you know how to get to it, whether the lights are on or off. The other piece is I would make sure that you're following us on our social channels, because we do put information out there. So make sure, if you haven't connected with us, that you do connect with us, and you can go to our website to find out what those all are. I won't run them off here. But the other piece that I would really strongly suggest is that people go and update their contact information into our database, which will become even more crucial as we start sending these alerts and messages directly to you, right? No longer just through social, but directly to you and your household, to be able to let you know what's going. And if I could say one other thing, is that I think planning based on our reliability that we've always had and the experience that you've always had to these dates, it's no longer enough, right? Like, Hydro Ottawa is going to do everything that we can to get the power back on, but you need to plan for worst case scenario. You can't plan only for best case. So having an alternative place to go, speaking with family and saying, if power's out here, we're going to come over, and what do we need to bring? Having those plans in place in advance makes you better equipped to withstand any weather event that comes through that may have an outage associated with it.
Okay, moving on. Hydro Ottawa released its 2021-2025 strategic direction. Why is that 5-year plan important, and what are the highlights from a customer perspective that customers should be aware of?
Yeah, I think any organization that's not looking 5 years out is going to be rudely awakened as you start to figure out what capital planning looks like. Like, it doesn't take you can't build a substation overnight. You cannot bring additional capacity into a city without some plans. And our strategic direction really helps us do that. And it helps put some guideposts in place with regards to keeping us focused, right? There's a lot of new technology that comes out, shiny things that people want, but really having a strategic direction that allows us to go back to what that North Star is, what those guiding points are, what is that end goal that we're trying to get to, is really important, because cities aren't planned on a dime, and neither is the grid that supports those cities. So that 5-year plan really looks and works with the city to say, where are you going? How is growth happening? And then how do we support that? And then in line with this strategic direction, we've also taken a very big leadership role in setting ourselves up for net zero, and not just us as Hydro Ottawa, but as a partner with the City of Ottawa, as a integral component of the Ontario electricity grid, an integral component of the Canadian grid. And I think that comes with a responsibility to make sure that we're looking forward and making the decisions that have to happen today for some of those assets that are going to be around for that 2050 goal that Canada has. So we're really focused on maintaining the reliability that we've been seeing over the last decade. We've had great reliability here in Ottawa, despite some of the storms that have happened. Our reliability numbers continue to be strong. So making sure that we're continuing to evolve in a smart way, in making sure that we maintain that reliability in line with the growth that's happening in the city, right? We're seeing not only expansion into some of the other, we're seeing suburbs butting up against each other now, right? And I'm not even sure if there's a true delineation between Canada and Stittsville sometimes, because it's like a bridge. You just go over one street and now you're in the different suburbs. So that blurring that's happening is fine. So that's the growth that's happening and expanding of the city. But we're also densifying some of the downtown core in those areas. So we're going upwards. And that requires some different type of planning on the infrastructure that already exists. We need to grow that infrastructure. We need to change how we're adapting in those areas potentially. And then looking at planning for vehicle switching from gas to EVs, right? So the electric vehicles, how do we support that growth? How do we support some of the growth with buildings that are converting from gas to electricity, or some of the new builds that are looking at different technology and making sure that as they're building, the capacity is there. So all of those things are in line within that we have an 8-point strategy that's there. And the customer continues to be the center of that strategy. So as we're making decisions, we're thinking of it through that customer lens, and how is the customer going to be impacted? How is the customer going to work with us? And let's make sure that we're spending money and time and focused energy on ensuring that the electricity grid is there for the needs of that future. And then the last piece that I would put is we're really looking at streamlining processes for our customers, right? There's a lot of steps that are in place and in some of those process flows that in some cases technology allows us to leapfrog for our customers. Many customers don't want to talk to us directly anymore, so they want to use chat functionality, or they want to just be able to go and search a frequently asked questions area, or get a how-to document sent to them so that they can do it in some cases themselves. And we are hearing that from our customers, and we are taking the steps to make sure that we streamline those processes for them.
Julie, what role, responsibility does Hydro Ottawa or utilities in general have when it comes to delivering solutions for customers to reduce their consumption and greenhouse gas emissions?
So I think that we have a big responsibility there on one, to keep people informed. I think awareness is pretty key when it comes to energy efficiency, and knowing where you're starting from, I think is a big component. So as utilities, I think we need to constantly ask ourselves, where is the customer in their knowledge of what we're trying to get them to do, or what they're needing to do, or what they're wanting to do. So I would hazard a guess that not many people have a true understanding of what their carbon footprint is. I would hazard a guess that we don't all know what our emission baseline is. So if we're asking people to do something to reduce that, and they don't know what their baseline is, I think that's a misstep. So utilities in general, I think, have a responsibility to help customers understand how to do that calculation. And then identify pathways and programs that they can make choices that help inch them towards what they're trying to do. So in some cases, it's painting the picture of what that future looks like, giving them choices of what the future can look like. And then once the customer chooses that, help them to make decisions to get them closer to that. So whether that be having a digital footprint with us, right? Reducing the need for us to mail a bill. So they're going off of paper and onto an email bill, or coming to a website to get all of the details behind their bill. I think helping them understand what that impact is important. Making sure that we are doing sustainable business practices for our customers is important as well, right? Like, we've made different choices in our building with regards to how we process waste, how we are moving around the city, what we do when we have trucks that may not be EV, there may not be an EV model ready for the trucks that we need, but how are we planning for that to bring in those sustainable business practices? How are we leveraging tools to be able to take not necessarily like unnecessary steps out of the process, whether it be a new material that's a more sustainable material that doesn't have us cutting down trees or others. Like I think there's some things that we are looking at that are to make choices about what that future is going to look like. And I think the other component that we have as utilities is we need to be leaders in the field, right? We need to look at what's happening, not just here in Canada, but there are other jurisdictions around this globe that have been doing conservation because they've needed to do conservation. And so they've I don't want to say perfected it, but they've advanced it significantly. And in some cases, we can leapfrog what their program is to an even better program with potentially new technology or even a different focus. So we're looking into Europe and what are they doing with regards to conservation? What are they doing with regards to energy efficiency? And how can we take what they're doing and adapt it here? And so I think utilities have a obligation to look outside of our own four walls, look outside of our province, even look outside of our country to see what are some of those things that are working elsewhere that can be brought here for our customers.
Now, wondering if you could outline some initiatives that Hydro Ottawa is doing to help its customers in that area.
Sure, there's a whole load of ones that we can talk to, and I would encourage you to follow our blog because we talk about a lot of those pieces and share some of those details in greater detail. And some of the case studies that we do share may have a direct impact to some other customers, and you would see how that translates into your business or into your household. But we work very closely with the City of Ottawa on their energy evolution file and taking a look at everything from where public EV chargers need to be set up, talking to them about how to retrofit their own buildings and be future-proofed and have a smart energy component to that, talking about how we build better communities. So we're there talking with them at the planning stages of that. So those are things that we do with the city. We are looking at distributed energy resources in a very thoughtful and deliberate way and seeing how we can leverage some of the distributed energy resources that exist in our city today, how we align it to the grid, and how we use these distributed energy resources to bridge the evolution that's needed to be able to get to that future where the capacity need is maybe even 3 times what we're seeing today. So how are we planning for that with traditional assets, but also how can we bridge and leverage distributed energy resources that exist and will exist in our service territory. So we're doing that. Tons of educations, as I talked about, whether you look at our blogs, the newsletters that go out, read them. There's some really cool things and ideas that are in there for you as residential customers and even commercial customers. We had an amazing symposium where we talked through that, just started some of the conversation about what these different projects and initiatives are that we're doing with customers and can do with customers. You look at the Zippy community right downtown, like right behind Chaudière, or right beside Chaudière Falls and behind the Parliament. And that community itself is built completely different, right? Looking at using renewable energy, looking at using the steam off of Kruger that's just across the river and how that heats the building and heats the community. And then looking at from an environmental footprint, what we did at Chaudière Falls with the eel ladder and helping with the eel migratory patterns is one element. We have a new substation in Barrhaven where we were very deliberate in keeping a parcel of that land for a pollinator meadow and really looking at how do we promote the pollinators to be in the area and help that particular growth. And then a number of conservation programs that we're working with either the ISO, which is our independent electricity system distributor or operator, and working with them and the Ministry of Energy on here are some programs that we see that can help bridge and defer capital investments because the capacity is here and we're sharing the capacity a little bit different, and even encourage people to conserve energy, and not leaving their lights on, not leaving motors running, generators running, and all kinds of different programs that we can look at from that perspective. So lots of pilots, lots of different programs that are in flight and pilots to come.
What new and innovative plans are you making for the short, mid, and long term when it comes to customers and what Hydro Ottawa offers?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned our battery loan program. That was one that we had thought would be a one and done type of thing during the early days of the pandemic, and the results that we saw in that program just made it one that we don't see going away anymore. So looking at continuing to evolve that program and scale it up. So I think that would be, a short-term one. Another short-term one is some of the EV programs that we're working on that are coming to market with regards to being able to not only see where the EVs are coming up, but predict where the next EVs are going to be coming in, and even having a bit of a different relationship with those EV owners. So some type of a demand response program, you'll see that to short to midterm, with regards to helping customers understand that if they defer or delay charging their car until the evening, there might be a cost benefit, but also system benefit to us overall. So I think you'll see a lot of those kind of demand response pilots to really see how and what we need to do, and engage our community in helping us get there. Right, we can't do this as single folks. We need to do this as a full community looking towards that future. And long term, I think you'll see some of those continue to innovate with regards to just building smarter communities, renewables within communities. You'll look at a different way of doing some substation work, and bringing that power here into the city of Ottawa.
Now, in 2021, Hydro Ottawa announced that it will achieve net zero operations by 2030. How will this help or improve the lives of Ottawa residents?
It's a very philosophical question in some cases, because I think there's still a lot of misconception or confusion around what net zero means, right? And people think that there's going to, net zero means there's no emissions, and that's not true. Net zero means that we are becoming carbon neutral or emission neutral. So we may emit some emissions over on one side of the business, but we're offsetting in another area. So I think it's a few different things. I think it gets us all thinking in a very different way. It helps to stimulate a conversation that is much needed to be able to advance. And I think we have a corporate responsibility to move that forward here within the city of Ottawa to align, especially being the capital of Ottawa. When you have your prime minister sit up there and say we're going to be net zero by 2050 and nobody moves until 2049, it's not going to work, right? So people need to move early. And I think Hydro Ottawa has demonstrated a lot of those advancements towards this net zero operations, even in advance of when we announced it, right? Like a lot of what we were doing, was really in play before that. We had a very different way of building our generation downtown Ottawa. And we took the environment into account. We took a very accountable, measured approach to how we were doing our development. And you're going to see that continue in what we do. As we build substations, how do we do that to make sure that we have the least impact on the environment and that we leave the space that we're in as good or better is really what we're trying to do than when we got there. I look at the Cambrian substation in Barrhaven, and it is better than when we put our plant there because we have a pollinator meadow that's very deliberate in what we're doing. We're taking care of the lands that are there, and you're going to see that happen throughout. And it's all in for that larger view. With regards to Ottawa residents, I think it's important for them to know that they have a utility provider that cares about that as much as they do. and that are putting very thoughtful approach to how we go about doing things. And we're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. It means something. This last spring, although it was small, and it's in infancy, and I see it growing. We planted trees as part of our employees, as part of their volunteer day that they get with the company. Went out into community and planted trees in an area that was where they were much needed. So I think you'll see a lot of those types of initiatives also happening within the city and with our company.
Julie, is this what customers expect from a modern utility? What other ways is Hydro Ottawa innovating?
Yeah, I think expectations on utilities, as well as most organizations, is changing significantly. Customers are wanting organizations, corporations to not just be good corporate citizens, but to be accountable for the decisions and the activities that they do, to be transparent in why we're making those decisions and how we're making those decisions. So when we talk about bringing in renewables, when we talk about being ready for electric vehicles, when we talk about bringing an energy management expertise into the area, it's really meant to make sure that customers have the information that they're already asking for, and that they're having information from a somewhat neutral party, right? In some cases, we're not looking at pushing one way or another, but making sure that people are informed to make the best decisions and know what the outcomes are. And I think we're uniquely positioned to do that. There's a lot of people that might sell renewables and help install solar panels, and we're not looking to replace any of those people. Like, it takes all kinds to make these things, all kinds of and components in the supply chain to make this come to a reality. But I think there is a natural space for Hydro Ottawa to be there to help inform customers on how to do this effectively, what this means to them. Like, adding solar panels to your rooftop has complications, and it also has implications for you as a homeowner. And I think it's important that people be informed as they're making those decisions to put two and two together, so that they don't later on find out that, and I'll use this example, they bought an EV and they bring it home and they have nowhere to plug it in because their condo corporation isn't set up effectively. There's nowhere for them to do public charging systems. I think that we need to make sure that we're helping customers make those informed decisions and how we can do that together. So things around, like you mentioned, cybersecurity and energy management, one of our conversations, and we're playing a big role in that. Like, I think if we would be naive to think that customers don't expect us to have some of the best cybersecurity programs in place. We are the custodians of the network that makes sure that they have energy to run their lives and electricity to run their lives. And I mentioned at the beginning of this that some people count on that to stay alive. So that is of utmost importance. And a certainty that we need to play a space in that. And then energy management, like, who do you turn to other than somebody who is really accountable to make sure that energy comes to your house, to be able to provide that expertise and help you through that and guide you through that process.
Now, what are some community carbon reduction projects that Hydro Ottawa has been involved in that customers might not be aware of?
Yeah, so Hydro Ottawa has been working with the city and a lot of customers around the Ottawa area to be able to help them with bring some of the carbon reduction projects that they have to life and to reality. So one of the big ones that I think maybe will touch everybody in the city of Ottawa is streetlight conversions. So we converted all of the streetlights to LEDs. So that provided a significant cost savings to the city of Ottawa with regards to their energy bill, but in most cases provided better lighting to the city streets, and has an element of controls in those lights to be able to allow the city to turn them up or down, depending, right? So there's some technology that's built into those city lights, and all done through cost savings to the city overall. So I think that was a big one that folks may not know about. We have been working with the city on their electric buses and bringing that vision to fruition. Electric buses, although we're not in the bus business, we are in the business now to support getting electricity to those buses and to where they need it, and planning where those bus resting stations are to recharge, making sure there's enough electricity and capacity going into the main headquarters where the buses park at night, do their maintenance, make sure that they get charged up for their routes, and working to make sure that they have everything there at a affordable process for the city, right? Making sure that we're looking at this model that we worked on with the city to make sure that Hydro Ottawa is working and supporting everything up to that charger, and the city is running the buses and running the routes. But we're staying in our lanes with regards to core competency, but making sure that we're bringing that vision to reality. And we're doing that same thing with the airport. We're not in the flight business, but we are in the business of making sure that as airports, specifically the airport here in Ottawa, are looking at electrifying everything under the wing, making sure doing fuel switching even in their passenger terminals, taking a look at lighting solutions all across, whether it's the parking garage or in the building, working with the airport on helping them get to their net zero commitments, and making sure that we have the expertise brought in. Sometimes it comes with understanding what different programs are out there and marrying those up, and we do that. And then the last one, I think, we've been working with some customers like the airport. So the airport's not a standalone customer story. We've got a number of those stories that we're working with customers to do that. We're working with Ottawa Police Services to be able to help look at their fleets and how do you support moving their fleets to electric vehicles, and other customers that are like that. And then looking and working with the City of Ottawa on public charging stations. Where would these be? Our new mayor, as part of his campaign, talked about public charging stations, talked about e-bike charging stations, and we're working hand in hand with them to help bring those visions and those plans to reality. That it's not just talk, but it is bringing those projects to life.
Okay, Julie, let's rewind and go back to the strategic plan. What are the key change drivers that are influencing Hydro Ottawa's future planning?
So we've used a 5D framework in our strategic direction, because these are drivers that are not just impacting our industry, but they're impacting everybody, and they're things that are happening, and you have to understand what it is, and then look at your own business, and then how you support customers. So the customers need to be aware as well. So we're really looking at these 5Ds. So the first one is decarbonization. I think we've had a lot of that conversation so far. It needs to be part of our programs. It needs to be part of our future design. It needs to be part of our discussions with customers. The second one is on digitization. And this one has been around for a while, right? Like, people have been migrating to using electronics, like e-bills, emails, versus, getting your bill in the mail, paying through some type of pay service versus sending in a check, or coming even to drop off money at Hydro. We haven't done that for a while, but those are pathways to this digitization. And I would say it's going further than that. We're looking at how do we make sure that customers have access to their data through a digital output. How can they connect their systems into that to make some decisions for them? So digitization is a big one for us, not just on the customer front. I would say in how we're developing our systems as well. Decentralization is one of those third Ds that people are looking at. I always laugh because industries go through centralization, decentralization. It's kind of a little bit of a flux piece that happens. But we are in a decentralization component, because I think the reality of, and Ottawa is in the ecosystem that we have, it's a pretty vast city. Like from a from a miles long, miles wide component. It's vast. It's not as big as some of the service territories that, like Hydro Quebec takes care of the entire province, but it's vast enough that you would think, why are we decentralizing? But there's the reality of things like the storm that bring it to light, that you need some loops within the system that are centered around where are people living and making sure that we can have some redundancy in different areas. So we are looking at that and what we do. Diversification, diversifying. Look, we talked about overhead underground a lot this year, especially after the storms. That's one form of diversification, but there's also looking at how do you incorporate renewables? It's a different type of energy production. How do you incorporate solar in a different way, in a very thoughtful way? And I can't stress that enough, because you can't just put solar across the entire city and think that that's going to work, right? You need to be able to integrate those pieces, right? If you want that energy future, you have to integrate solar into the existing grid and look at how we do this as a community-based component. So diversification is definitely leading a lot of the discussions here and what we do. And the last one is demographics. Look, the city is changing. We used to be English, French only. We have different languages that are coming to be, so that, that's the basics of it. But also taking a look at the changing demographics of the workplace, the changing demographics of where people are working and how people are working. Like demographics is a little bit different, right? There's a sociographic component to that, or a psychographic component that comes into that as well, that we're looking at. How do we speak to customers? How do we make sure that they have information? What are we making sure that we're doing when we plan work, right? Like we have to do maintenance on our system. How do we do that and support our customers? So all 5 of those Ds really are part of how we evaluate the work and the projects that we get involved in.
What has been the impact of the pandemic on electricity customers, and how has that influenced your role and also Hydro Ottawa's relationship with its customers?
Yeah, the pandemic has, I think, thrown a very different work-life reality here. Ottawa, for the most part, did not see the unemployment rates as some of the other cities across Canada. So in some cases, we've been fortunate, but the impacts are still there. So for the utility, and I talked about it in the previous question a little bit, but for the utility, how we go about doing our work matters more now, I would say, coming through the pandemic. It matters more because when we used to plan work on our grid, we used to plan it during the day. So we would go into a community and we would know that the bulk of the customers in that community were at work between 9 and 5, let's say, or 9 and 3. And we could get a lot of work done without really impacting customers. And now it's not like that. Those homes have become daycares, not just during the pandemic, but as a perpetual thing now, right? We've got hybrid work components. So you can't decide that this, or you can't even hazard an educated guess that this community is going to be predominantly out between these hours on this day. Like that doesn't happen anymore. So working with customers and giving them more advance notice in some cases, making sure that they get this information in a timely manner so that they can plan around it the same way that we're planning is super critical. And I would say that ultimately is probably the biggest changes that we've seen with our customers, is making sure that we can continue to do the work at the least impact to our customers. And I think that's why we talked about the battery loan program. That's why it's become such an important piece of the future for our customers. We'll not be able to give it to everybody, but at least it's a program that will kind of look at how we can evolve and be able to support our customers through those times.
Okay, Julie, we always end our interviews with some rapid fire questions, and we've got some for you. Are you ready?
I am.
Okay, Julie, what are you reading right now?
I'm actually reading 2 books right now. One is called Ed Millett's The Power of One More, which is a pretty inspirational story that was based on his father, just doing one more thing, one more minute talking to a customer, reaching out to one more customer. It's kind of a really cool dynamic when you pull it into a workspace. And the other one is Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. I'm reading that as part of our we had a lot of conversation about crisis communication and emotion, and Atlas of the Heart was one of those recommendations. So I have taken her up on that.
Now, what would you name your boat if you had one?
Yeah, I don't know if I thought this one 100% through, but I think I would say unstoppable, maybe unsinkable as a boat.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. Who is someone that you admire?
There's so many people to choose from, but here I'd say my mom. She's a powerhouse. She's like mastered the balance of staying calm and keeping the calm, even in the craziness of the chaos. She has that ability to find a path forward for people and during insanely stressful situations. So she like reaches down and like picks people up gently sometimes not so gently, and gives you a good kick in the butt, to get you into overdrive when needed. So if I could garner some of that into who I am, I think that would be amazing.
Okay. What is the closest thing to real magic that you've witnessed?
Yeah, this is a hard one for me to put into words, but let me see if I can do it. Like in the chaos of some of these weather events that we've seen, like I've witnessed our team go from full throttle, heads down, like almost militant robotic work mode, trying to get the power back on. And they can stop in those tracks and become this completely empathetic, supportive human being to some of the most vulnerable people that they encounter, whether it be somebody who they see is needing help to shovel their driveway because they're struggling, or a child comes up to them with a bunch of cards to give to Hydro Ottawa because their classmates made them in class and they want to give them to them, and they're coming up right to a workstation. Like I see this switch happen on a dime, and in my opinion, it's so magical. So I guess in my opinion, that would be pure magic moment.
Okay, next one here. What has been the biggest challenge to you personally since the pandemic began?
Yeah, as a single parent, I think it's easy for me to say something like anytime the schools were doing virtual learning and trying to juggle all of, work, being a teacher, which is I think the hardest job in the world. Especially in some of those with some of those kids that just can't sit still, which is my son. But I would have to say the hardest part for me has been witnessing folks who are struggling, trying to get back on their feet, whether that be financially, but more so, I would say struggling to get back on their feet mentally coming out of the pandemic.
Okay, moving on. We've all been watching a lot of Netflix and TV. What are your favorite movies or shows?
It's funny because I saw this and I would say, yes, that's a true statement, but I haven't been watching a lot of Netflix and TV. But my family Friday night movie go-tos these last few weeks has been the Home Alone series. And I don't know why. Coming up to Christmas, I guess that's what it is. But Home Alone has been the movie. I think we're up to the third one or fourth one now for our Friday movie nights.
Lastly, what's exciting you about your industry, our industry right now?
Oh, geez, what's not exciting? I think we're in a pivotal moment in the energy industry, like a kind of table clearing moment when we're working across boundaries, like I'm talking about physical boundaries, across fuel providers, across the local distributed companies talking together, across energy providers, private and public energy providers of all kinds of different solutions out there. Everybody's at this table working to develop solutions. It's such an exciting time because the egos in some cases get completely put outside and just really focused on the same goal, on trying to get us to that smart, sustainable, affordable energy future. And to me, that is absolutely the most exciting part of our industry right now.
Well, Julie, we've reached the end of another episode of the Think Energy podcast. If our listeners wanted to learn more about you and our organization, how could they connect?
So I am on LinkedIn, so you can find me at Julie Lupinacci on LinkedIn, or you can connect right through our website. So if you send something through there saying you want to talk to me, it'll find its way to me directly.
Again, Julie, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had a lot of fun.
I did.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Think Energy podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening. And to find out more about today's guest or previous episodes, visit thinkenergypodcast.com. I hope you'll join us again next time as we spark even more conversations about the energy of tomorrow.